We cannot wait to see you all at the Unashamedly You conference this September 22nd and 23rd. And guess what? We now have a promo code for you podcast listeners. So go grab your conference ticket at unashamedlyu.com/event. And at checkout, use promo code UY Podcast for 10% off of any ticket, your Inner Circle or the Access Pass. Use promo code UY Podcast. Come expecting to be enlightened, encouraged, and empowered to live the life that God is calling you to live unashamedly. Hello, and welcome to the Unashamedly You podcast, a space to enlighten, encourage, and empower you to go out and unashamedly be who God is calling you to be. I am your host, Jamie Herndon. I pray you hear less of me and more of Him as you listen to today's episode. Let's grow together. Today we have a guest on that I am personally anxious to hear from. She is a very talented and anointed singer, and she's using her talents and abilities to bless the kingdom of God. I have no doubt you are going to be blessed from her words today and her testimony that she's going to be giving us. But Jasmine Corcoran, thank you so much for agreeing to be on the Unashamedly You podcast, and take a moment and introduce yourself to us.
Thank you. I'm so excited. Yes, I'm Jasmine Corcoran. I'm originally from Georgia. Have settled for the last 19 or so years in Birmingham, Alabama. So I guess it's about time for me to say I'm from Alabama, but been here in the Birmingham area for so long at the Sanctuary Apostolic Church with the Bertrams. And I'm a music minister here for several years now. I can't remember how many, but several. Also work outside of ministry. I work for Alpha Insurance and sell all kinds of insurance. So that's fun. Work a regular 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. And I've been married to my husband, Matt, for almost 19 years. It'll be 19 years in August. And we've got 2 kiddos. I've got Dylan, who's 12, and Lana, who's 6, and are the most fun ever. I love to sing. I love all things music. I love to read. Love, love, love to read. And yeah, that's me. That's about it.
Well, we are so glad to have you and yourself here on the Unashamedly You podcast. I can't wait to hear more from you. My husband's Matt too, and we are
Oh,
celebrating
funny.
16 years in September. So we're kind of right behind you.
Nice.
That's
Nice.
exciting.
Mats are great.
They are incredible guys, I tell you. If y'all are listening to this right now, we love you and you're amazing. So, what we want to talk about, I want to have you on here to share your testimony because there's no doubt it is very powerful. You've been very vulnerable with your testimony and things that you've been going through in the last year or so. But I personally feel like I heard about you when you had sang a song that was written by a friend of ours, Nathan Eddy, and it's called Working on Your Testimony. These words are so powerful to this song. I personally have listened to this song going through trials and whenever I needed something to lean on and just knowing that God was working on my testimony. But it seems like not long after you sang this song, you were faced with a trial that I'm sure you had no idea that you were going to be faced with and have to lean on those words in a way that you never dreamed of. So
Yeah.
would you take some time with us today and just share about that song and the testimony that God has been working on for you?
Well, I showed up in Little Rock to get Kurt to help me record, honestly thinking that I was going to do 10 covers and ended up hearing, I think Nathan was actually there for a couple nights that I was there doing demos. And we heard it and was like, yes, this. And I had no idea how much that song was going to blow up. And it's helped me. Like I tell people like, oh, I listened to that song. And I'm like, no, I'm not even kidding. It gets me every time. Like every time I sing it, I choke up just because even before any of the last year happened. But in June of 22, so just a little over a year ago, we were actually the night before we were leaving for Disney World for my company trip. And my son, who was 11 at the time, had a couple issues with a couple lymph nodes that were swollen. I'd taken him to the doctor about a month before. They are checking for blockages. He just said his stomach wasn't quite right. He's tired. I chopped it up. Like, he's my oldest. So I hadn't done anything like this before. I'm like, okay, it's hormones. He's 11. You know what's going on. They said it could be just a virus and just to watch it. Well, the Friday before we were supposed to leave, which I believe was June 10th, my husband calls me at work and says, Dylan's jaws are just swollen, like his jaw swollen. And I'm like, just go to the doctor. And I'd noticed a few things. Hindsight tells me what they were, but I've noticed a few things. Like I said, he found a couple lymph nodes, and then our house is on a hill, and he had gone to get the trash can because, that's what little boys do. And he'd go to get the trash can for us. And he came in the house and he was like, whew, I had ran out of breath running the trash can up, which I thought was odd at the time because he is the most active child. He just has always excelled at all sports, never stopped running. And so I thought that was kind of odd, but I was like, well, maybe he's just coming down with something or, got a cold, whatever. Anyway, go to the doctor, and the doctor that we normally see wasn't there on Friday, which is no big deal. But I think the fact that she had kind of fresh eyes, she was like, y'all need to do blood work. Y'all need to do blood work. And so my husband takes him to do blood work. Something crazy goes on with blood work, which now, and I'll tell you in a minute why I know that was God, but they were like, so the place that you did blood work, they should have gotten him in, but they didn't get him in. We're telling her, well, we're trying to leave for Disney World. Is this something that can wait? And she's like, I just really don't think you need to wait. Why don't I call Children's Hospital? There's a Children's Hospital that's 45 minutes from us. And they said, why don't I call Children's Hospital and let them know you're coming? They'll do blood work. And they have labs that will work around the clock. You won't have to wait on this place to be done with them on Monday. So we get there, and this whole time I am on the internet, which now, everyone says when you get sick, don't get on the internet. I did it anyway. And I was Googling symptoms, and I just recently even said these words out loud to someone a couple months ago, but it was like, it gives you the worst case scenario on WebMD. And one of the things was leukemia. And I wouldn't even let myself read the word. And I was like, no, no. So anyway, we get to Children's, and it was still during COVID restrictions. They wouldn't let my husband in because we're literally packed to leave for Florida. And so they wouldn't let my husband and my daughter in. Only one parent was back in the emergency room at the time. And so I go back there with them, and I'm trying to say these things to where maybe my 11-year-old son won't be privy to what I'm saying. But the doctors are like, well, we're going to run another test. And well, I think we're going to run another test. And now we've been in the ER for, 2.5 hours. And I'm like, we're just trying to go to Disney World. Please just let me get to Florida with my kids. We're trying to go on vacation. And I finally look at one of the doctors, and they're bringing Children's is a teaching hospital. So it's not really crazy for there to be several people in the rooms with you, but we're just on a little ER visit doing blood work. And so a team comes in, and they're like, we just want to talk. And they kept asking all these questions, same questions over and over and over. And finally I look at her and I say, are you trying to rule something out? And she was like, yes. And I said, is it bad? And she was like, yes. And I said, is it really, really bad? And she said, yes. And I said, okay. I said, I just needed someone to tell me that so I would quit trying to rush us out of here. And so fast forward a couple of days, they end up admitting us that night. We're just going crazy. At this point, we're just all praying it's mono or something like that. And one of the oncologists that comes in told me, she was like, if this isn't lymphoma, I don't know what it is. I have 0 doubt. And we're just like, what? Anyway, they tell us that it's definitely either some kind of blood disease, whether it be lymphoma or leukemia or something like that, but something definitely is not right. They did blood work, white blood count is way out of whack. Now, granted, a month before it was not when we did the blood work before, but this doctor is saying it's definitely lymphoma. So they decide they're going to do a biopsy. They decide they're going to do a biopsy of one of his lymph nodes. So that's when he goes back for his first little surgery. This kid has never had anything more than an ear infection. And now all of a sudden we're in the ER or we're in the children's hospital, talking all these crazy big words. And obviously cancer is definitely on the table at this point. And every time we're in the room and we're just trying to stay happy, and people with children are amazing. But, there's people coming in with art projects. We're just trying to keep our mind off things and everything. But every time that a team comes in to tell you something, you're like, well, this can't be good. Why is there 8 people in here? Anyway, they do the lymph node and the biopsy, and they realize not lymphoma, but that it is leukemia. And at this point, they haven't decided what type of leukemia it is. We're all crying. And I want to make this point just because my kid is so awesome, but everybody's crying. The doctors are in there and, they're just like this delicate moment, which, they probably see every day. But Dylan's crying, I'm crying, Matt's crying. We're just trying to figure this out. And they're already starting to tell us, well, this is the plan and XYZ. And I just said, can you give us just a minute? We need to pray. And so we stop and all the doctors in the room. And you talk about Holy Ghost boldness, because I'm usually not like that. I'm like, we're just going to step outside. I just couldn't hear that mama bear with your kid, And I said, give us just a minute. We're going to pray. With all them sitting there, I started praying and my husband started praying. And we're just like, God, it is what it is. You have the final say, but we still will expect and believe healing. But you got to help us. And I've always found it really smart to just be honest with God. I don't know. I feel like when I first started really falling in love with Jesus, I felt like I needed to follow a script for prayer. And, I have to be like the psalmist and be eloquent. And then about one day I realized, you know what? He gave me these feelings. He gave me this vocabulary. I might as well shoot straight with him. So I'm pretty sure that I said something like, this is really stupid. And, I don't get it. I don't understand it, you know, but you're going to have to help us. And we prayed. And in the middle of that prayer, I hear my 11 at the time year old son saying, God, thank you for these doctors. And thank you for these nurses that are helping us and going to try to help us feel better. And anyway, he's been like that literally since day one. I call him an old soul. He's always been a little old man. He's been pushing 40 since he was born, but just, wise beyond his years. And that kind of set the tone for the next few weeks. So we start the chemo process and, we're praying and everything's happening. And I'm going to be honest with you, that song, I'm constantly getting texts and I'm getting messages and people praying for us. And one thing that everyone keeps saying is, he's just working on your testimony, play on words of sort. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I thought many times, and I think I even said it to my pastor's wife. I wish I never recorded that stupid song. Not because it wasn't an amazing song and not because I really regretted the song or recording it, but because I was having to live it on the other side and be like, I didn't have the capacity at that moment to even see an outcome. All I saw in that moment was my kid hurt me. And my kid who'd never had anything but an ear infection have surgeries and have to get a port installed and learning medicine names and learning different types of cancers and finding release forms. And that's all I could see at that moment, which is literally what the dialogue of the song is. Just saying, when you're like, hey, Jesus, you forgot about me. That's where that song ministers to people. And so it was just so hard, even being the one who put this down in the music to those lyrics. to be the one to really have to examine it and live it. But I made a hospital playlist, and every single song was something about no fear, trusting God, I'm healed, things like that. Just kind of everyone's really antsy. And when people say you don't get any rest in the hospital, it's the absolute truth. And so just needing something to calm us down. Just a lot of mellow songs talking about trusting God and healing and everything else. And I can't remember whose suggestion, because I wasn't going to put that song on there, but I can't remember whose suggestion it was that someone was like, you need to put testimony on your playlist. And so it would shuffle through about 40 different songs, and that one would shuffle through, and I would make myself listen to it because I didn't want to. Because people say everything happens for a reason, and I've been through some tough stuff. And a lot of things you're like, there's not a good enough reason. But I've preached this everywhere, figuratively and literally, if you let me, that, there may not be a good enough reason, but everything works together for our good, the good stuff and the bad stuff. And sometimes it's just a matter of you putting purpose to something. So, the little old lady at church saying everything happens for a reason isn't really how you want to digest it, but everything can have a good purpose in the end. Anyway, so fast forward, June 15th was the day of his actual diagnosis. And we start on a chemo regimen that's going once a week. On July 3rd, we were actually planning on going to my brother-in-law's house. He's got a pool. We were going to go swim for the 4th of July. And Dylan said that morning, he said, man, I feel pretty good. If I still feel this good tomorrow, I might want to go to Uncle Tommy's. And so we were excited. And probably not even an hour after he spoke those words, he's sitting at the bar in our kitchen, and he's banging, and he's a drummer. So there's noise all the time. But me being a musician myself and knowing how good my kid is on the drums, I'm like, that is so offbeat. And I look up, and at first he's just kind of like shaking and all this, but his hands are up on the bar. And I said, what are you doing? And I mean, like, you're being crazy. What are you doing? And I get a good look at him, and he's not right. And I run over there, and I realize he's seizing. And my mom's the PA, and she actually moved in with us to help with Dylan. She retired a couple of years ago. Little did she know, all of her things working together for the good was to be able to come help us. And anyway, well, that day she was of no help. She freaked out just as much as I did. But my husband worked for the railroad, and he had just gone through safety training, and they had just done new CPR training, new everything, new like after seizure care and everything. So he knew exactly what to do. He'd been having some blood sugar problems. So he thought maybe his blood sugar had dropped, blood sugar problems from the chemo. So we thought maybe his blood sugar had dropped, and Lord have mercy, it's almost funny. I think it was a couple more years and it will be funny. But my mom and I were trying to put chocolate syrup down his throat, and we thought maybe that was it. Oh, Lord have mercy. Anyway, call the ambulance. I live kind of right on the outskirts of town, so a little bit in the sticks. So it took a while for them to get to us. We get to the emergency room back at Children's, and they had him on oxygen the whole time. He's had several seizures in the ambulance. And anyway, we get there, and he's only getting about 80, low 80s% oxygen. So we're looking in this, they take him into this big trauma room. They don't let Matt or I in there. And it's crazy because you just see 15 people standing over your baby. And they had one of the doctors come out, and we could see in the room, and she was explaining everything that they were doing. And they were like, he's not getting enough oxygen, so we're going to put him on a vent. And we're coming straight out of COVID. And vent is a 4-letter word, literally. And you just hear once you go on the vent, you don't get off. And so my brain is just going crazy. Anyway, scared to death doesn't even capture the feelings that we were having. And we're just watching all this. Well, my mom has called all the people. And my pastor's wife, and one of my very best friends is in the waiting room. And I just can't watch anymore. And I just have to leave. And So I make the excuse that I'm going to go tell them where we are and tell them what's going on. So I go out there and I lose it. And if anybody ever says they don't meet the church, I can tell you that's exactly why I didn't meet the church. And I looked at my pastor, and my pastor laughed and I said, I can't pray anymore. I don't have any more prayers. And my pastor said, that's why we're here. And right in the middle of the waiting room at Children's Hospital, the three of them witch praying. So I get my wits together. My personality type is laugh to keep from crying. And so by the end of that, I'm like, man, I'm glad y'all are here for my nervous breakdown. And but I tell them what's going on and I go back in. They go do an MRI. Then they realize after this MRI that he's got a blood clot in his brain. And we have no idea what's going on. And I kept telling the EMTs, I'm like, he's new on chemo. I don't know what that means, but he just started chemo. He's newly diagnosed with leukemia. He's new on chemo. And they're like, okay, well, he probably has a fever. It's probably, fever, whatever. And anyway, once we get in there they do the MRI, they realize, okay, he's got a blood clot in his brain. And he also had a brain bleed. So they say, we have to treat the clot. So basically, what's happening is having those seizures. He's basically having strokes from not enough oxygen getting to his brain from this blood clot. And they go in and they immediately do brain surgery. We're in the waiting room of the ICU waiting on him because he'll be released to the ICU. Just a few of us there, my mom, pastor's wife, and Dylan's big daddy, which very, very close friends, but family. And we're all in the waiting room. And then they send a chaplain. And one of his oncologists came as well and just tells us this is something that one of the chemos can do. There's no way for us to try and find out. It just happens when it happens. It presents as clotting issues, not always in the brain, sometimes in lungs, legs, whatever. But Dylan's, of course, is he going to do it? He's going to do it all the way. And his is in his brain. Neurosurgery comes in once he's placed in the ICU. He's on a vent. He's swollen. He's obviously sedated. Just nothing I ever thought I'd see. And while he's in there having the surgery, they call our church to pray. And I'm on my phone. I'm telling everybody I know. I'm like, you got to pray. I've had the pleasure of speaking at several ladies' conferences in the past. And so I have some heavy hitter women of the faith numbers in my phone by default, just for being on text groups with them about hotel stuff. And so, but I save them and just so I can be like, I have Carla Burton's phone number. But anyway, she's one of the ones that I texted and I was like, I need you to pray. And I text several of my friends, several people from my church gather at our church to pray. And in hospital world, no news is good news. In family, that's not good. We're just sitting there on pins and needles waiting. And my mom was one of the ones at the church, and it was around 10 o'clock. And she swears, she says, I know what it happened. I know what it happened. But the issue was, got ahead of myself. The issue was they were treating the clot. They said, we'll have to deal with the brain bleed later. We have to treat the clot. So they've got to go in there and do, it's called a thrombosis, and get this clot out. But we're just going to have to deal with the brain bleed. All kind of issues with brain bleeds can come about. They're at this point, they're preparing us for stroke symptoms. They're preparing us if and when he comes out of this, there could be issues, mental issues, slowness and stuff like that, to learning to walk, learn to talk, all this they're preparing us for. So we're praying. They tell us we'll do what we can about the clot. We're going to have to deal with the bleed when it happens. And the neurosurgeons told us it's probably not going to stop. He's on the highest dose of heparin, which is blood thinner, to help break up this clot. The bleed is what the bleed is. Anyway, so we get to praying, church gets to praying, and my mom says she knows it's around 10 o'clock. She knows when it stopped, and I 100% believe her. But we find out later, somehow, and when the neurosurgeons come to you and say, I guess it was a miracle, and they're so dismissive, but I know it was a miracle that bleed stopped. And so now the bleed is gone. He went from July 3rd on the vent, seizing, active brain bleed, blood clot in his brain, having to have brain surgery. And 3 days later, he's sitting up in his bed eating a pizza. When they finally took the vent out, I got him to squeak out. I said, "I love you, bud." And I got him to squeak out, "I love you." But he couldn't talk for a little while. I had no idea. He said he was thirsty. I let him have some water. I didn't know it was just to do that. The very next day, speech therapy comes in and like, we're going to try to get him to drink something, see if he can swallow. See. And I'm like, oops, he's been drinking. They come in, well, let us see if he can eat something. He hadn't eaten in 2.5 days. He eats a graham cracker. He'll still to this day say that's the best graham cracker he's ever had in his entire life. They're like, okay, well, he's fine. The next day, physical therapy comes in. They're like, we're going to try to get him up. They start him off throwing a little ball. He's doing great, throwing a little ball. They say, we're going to try to get him to stand up. He stands up. Okay, we're going to see if he can walk around. He walks around this whole time, too. He's been very private. I mean, he's an 11-year-old boy. He makes me and all the nursing staff leave if he has to use the bathroom. I'm like, my kid is normal. I hadn't had anybody tell me that yet, but I'm like, I think he's okay, you know? And anyway, they take him out and they're like, okay, we're going to teach him how to walk down the stairs. He's trotting up and down the stairs like it's no big deal. And every person that passes through there, they're like, he's a miracle. It's a miracle. And God 100% stopped that brain bleed. No doubt in my mind, I will scream it from the rooftops for the rest of my life. God stopped that brain bleed. No symptoms from the clot, no stroke symptoms, no delayed speech, no delayed thinking, nothing. And he's doing great. Now, a year later, the B cell ALL protocol for the type of leukemia that he has, they actually have a standard of care, which most cancers do not have. They're so confident in their treatment plan that it starts from A and ends at Z. Most cancers, it's at your oncologist's discretion, your doctor's discretion. But this type of cancer, they know what they do. And so he's got chemo tomorrow. He'll have chemo once a month until October of 2024, just to completely, as much as we can, avoid any kind of relapse. He's in remission now. Thank you, Jesus. But remission with bone marrow cancer, you can't check all of your bone marrow at the same time. So in a scientific perspective, they get it to where they can see it's under a certain percentage in his bone marrow, or that they see zero, what they call blast, in his bone marrow. But they still continue treatment because they can't check all of your bone marrow at once. So just almost in preventative care, they keep you in the chemo until October 24. And I've had a lot of people tell me a lot of things and ways that they think that we should handle it, and ways that, they foresee we're either trusting God or not trusting God, whatever. We're continuing with the standard of care up until October 24. But let it be known, I know that God is 100% in control. He stopped that brain bleed. I almost feel like sometimes when I'm praying against relapse, that the Lord is rolling his eyes at me saying, okay, Jasmine, got it. And I know that he's in complete control and I trust him 100%. But we are continuing with the standard of care up until October 24. It doesn't really bring him down anymore. He's able to live a normal life. He still has his porch, but he's gone back to school. He's able to participate in normal things. In the beginning, you're so compromised. They want you in the house, staying away. They cut us out a corner in the back of our church for us to be able to still go. He's up at the front, running around, jumping, praising the Lord with everybody else now. Back playing the drums at church. He's doing a great job. He's doing amazing. All that to say, he's working on our testimony, whether I wanted to hear it in the beginning or not. God has 100% brought me full circle. I don't think that that's the reason why I recorded that song, for me to be able to be like, oh yeah, what I said a couple years ago, it remains true, but it's still just as true. Dylan's such an introvert, and I know he's got such a calling on his life. And sometimes I've wondered, sitting back, I'm like, is this how this is going to come to pass as far as him having a voice? Is this kind of the what he'll use to be the icebreaker? Is this what he'll use to help people or to witness to people, in other ways where he would never start a conversation before?
It's one thing when you have to listen to someone else sing the words to that song and listen to someone else minister through that song and those words minister to you. But thinking about all that you have went through in this past year and having to sit there and listen to yourself minister to yourself. God really has the way of bringing things about full circle, and he really has a way of letting us know he has us in the palm of his hand. He is in control. And the way that he does things, sometimes you look back and you're like, God, you really had me singing this song. But whenever you're in that hospital and you're
Yeah,
listening to yourself sing those words, that has to be an incredible moment and a moment where you're like, Lord, whether I want this happening or not, you're doing it and you're working at all things for my good. And you really are bringing testimony about
exactly.
and through this.
Exactly. And I think that's part of the reason why, because usually I don't listen to myself because I think it's kind of weird. Like my daughter will ask to listen to songs that are on my album, and I'm like, that's so awkward. But I could sit there and listen to myself sing that. And even though I couldn't remember it, I know I really do believe that. We're sitting here in a really, really dark place right now, but I really, really do believe the words to this song.
We always have a plan and direction of which way that our life should go. And I've recently interviewed someone that had went through something as well. And she said, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to dream. We're supposed to have a direction that we want our lives to go. We're supposed to think and, have goals and all these things set, but know that we're really just here and everything that we do hinges on the mercies of God. It
Mhm.
hinges on God's plan, and we're praying and we're singing, "God, I want your will, and I want, if you can use anything, you can use me." And we want him to use our life, and we want him to work on a testimony that we have where we can bring him glory, and we want our lives to bring him glory. And then he starts working on it, and he starts doing those things through us, and he starts using us, and he starts, bringing things about in our lives, and we're like, "Well, Lord, I really just didn't want you
Wait a minute.
I didn't want a testimony this great, God."
Right. And I've said before, like Matt and I lost a baby before Dylan, and I was 32 weeks pregnant. I was 8 months pregnant, and on sudden onset preeclampsia hit me, and I had a stillborn daughter. And I remember thinking, in those moments, haven't I been through enough? you know? And because I had, rough things happen in my childhood and innocence taken from me early. And when we lost Chloe, thinking, really? Something else? And God helped me. That's when I got that revelation of everything can have a purpose. We can be bitter or we can be better. The choice is really ours. Life is going to happen no matter what. Things are going to happen. It just does. And some of it's good, some of it's bad. And sometimes you look at people who don't live the best life and don't acknowledge God in any way. And you're like, man, they're getting all the blessings and I'm over here going through it. But sometimes it's vice versa, like life just happens. And that's when I got that revelation of, you know what, I'm going to give this a purpose. And I would tell people, and when I would minister to people, I'd be like, you know, you can really take anything and you can give it purpose and you can let it help you. And I can look back on those things and be like, man, I still wish maybe those things hadn't happened. But since they did, I can give it purpose and I can help somebody. Like I tell people, after we lost Chloe, it was like so many people that I knew were having miscarriages or infant loss. And I would tell them, I don't have words to say to you because there are none, but I know how to pray for you. And I will do that, you know, there's not a whole lot that I had been through that I couldn't say, I know how to pray for you with this. I may not have words that will help you because right now there probably aren't any words that can help you, but I know how to pray for you. And so when we're sitting there in hospital rooms and infusion clinics and, watching my kid go through this, and I'm having to remember the words that I've said to other people. I can be bitter or I can be better. And I even heard those words come out of my kid's mouth to me, you know, you always say we can be bitter or we can be better, and we're going to be better, you know? And now I can see, okay, well, this is just another piece of my puzzle. And it's just another way that I'm going to be able to say, hey, guess what, guys? In a perfect world, no one would get cancer. But let me tell you about the mercies of God. Let me tell you about the instantaneous miracle within the healing. God's still healing him. And it's just another way that I can say I can minister. I tell people all the time, we've got two purposes in the world. And Sister 𝑒𝓃𝓁𝒵𝒃 Cooley said this at a ladies' conference that I went to several years ago, and I've never forgotten it. We all wrestle. We're like, what's my calling? What's my ministry? What's my purpose? And when it comes down to it, we have two purposes in this life: to know him and to make him known. That's it. Whether there be no microphone ever in my hand, or whether I never have a title in front of or behind my name. At the end of the day, my purpose boils down to know him and to make him known. I may use my voice to do that in music ministry, but at the end of the day, it is just to know him and to make him known. And so whatever goes on in my life, I don't have time to just be like, why me? Why again? Why this? Because my purpose is to know him and make him known. So I'm going to make sure whatever comes at me. Now, it might take me a minute to come around. I'm a human. But at the end of the day, I'm going to be like, you know what? Got it. At the end of the day, I'm going to be able to say, man, God has helped me get through this. God has helped me along the way. So much of the time we think we have to, especially as women and mothers, we carry everything. And I just had to come to the terms that if I could handle this on my own, I wouldn't need Jesus. There would be no purpose in him having come and died on the cross. Like, he is my savior to be my savior. I can't do this. So even though I'm watching my kid go through leukemia and I'm watching my whole family go through it, at the end of the day, I can say, well, my purpose is to know him and make him known. So I'm going to make sure that every victory, every help that I get, every peace of mind moment that I have, I can't remember what song it is that says, I've got peace that makes no sense. Every time I'm in the middle of turmoil, in the middle of a storm, and I have peace that makes no sense, I'm going to make sure that God gets the glory for it. He didn't take the mountain away, but man, did he help me climb it, you know?
So good. You're definitely ministering to us in the Unashamedly You community. And I know that someone listening to this right now, you are drawing strength from her words and from the things that she has been through. There's no doubt about it. Jasmine, we are so grateful that you've
Oh,
taken
thank
time to
you.
be on this podcast and to share vulnerable moments with us and let us know that God, He is our help. He is our strength.
Mm,
He is that peace that makes no sense. And saying that about just to know him and to make him known. That's something I will never forget myself. Thank you so
mhm.
much for sharing that. Is
Thank
there
you.
one last thing that you would like to share with the Unashamedly You community today and leave on the podcast?
Honestly, the best thing I can say is, and it's going to ring true from day one to day 1 million, is to just trust God. Just trust him. You know, like I said, sometimes I think we wander around and we make living for Jesus way more complicated than it really is. We see pastors and ministers. I know I've done it. Every time I get to go to one of these ladies' conference, I feel like I'm a kid and it's my first time at the adult table, you know? And we think that we've got to be way up here and you've got to be so established. But honestly, your ministry starts at Walmart. Your ministry is at work. Just show people that you have a savior. Show people that God's helping you get through it. You know, I've had people tell me, and I think it's hilarious. They've been like, you are so strong. And honestly, I am the weakest I have ever been. I have never been this weak as far as in myself. as far as in my confidence to make the right decisions for, you know, the health plan of my kid, or to make sure that my other child is getting enough attention, and getting enough moments with mom and dad. I've never, been so unsure about just my daily life. Am I doing enough here? Am I doing enough here? Am I doing enough serving at my home church? And people will say, "You're just so strong. How do you do it?" And I'm like, I'm not. It's the Lord. And I hope that if there's anything that I can convey, even people that don't have a personal relationship with me, but that I can convey over things like this or social medias or at my job or whatever, it's just that, you know what? I watched that gal go through it and she never gave up on God and she never stopped trusting the Lord. And like I said in the beginning, I may pray and I may say things like, "God, this is stupid and I don't like it and it doesn't make sense. And I'm really upset at you and I'm really mad and I'm not going to lie because you already know my heart, but I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you." One of my favorite songs right now is Still Everything. And it's probably my longest reigning favorite song because being musical, my favorite song changes almost daily. But it says his glory is to say here in the wilderness. And sometimes that's just the decision that you've got to make. You know, if you want the church to hurt you, it's gonna hurt you. If you want your friend to hurt your friend's gonna hurt your feelings. If you want to feel set aside and looked over and stepped on, then that's how you're gonna feel. But if you say, whatever it may be, that God, you know what? Your glory is the same here in this wilderness. And come what may, I will bless the Lord at all times, and his praises shall continually be in my mouth. I promise you, he will give you that peace that makes no sense. And he will give you the victory over whatever it is that hurt you or brought you down or put you in any kind of darkness. He will every single time.
That was so good. So good and so needed. It's so true. That what you want out of life and what you want God to be, that's what he's going to be for you.
Mhm.
And what you put into him and what you put into this, that's what you're going to get out. When you put faith into him, you're going to get that return. Whenever you tell him he's faithful, he's faithful. Whenever you tell him
Exactly.
he's good, he's good. Whenever you tell him, I don't know why you're putting me through this, but I trust you anyways. When you're standing in the fire and you tell him, I trust that you're showing up, he'll be the fourth man every time. He'll show up
Exactly.
every time.
Every
Thank you.
single time.
Thank you so much for
Thank
all that
you.
you have poured into this podcast today. We are forever grateful for the words that you have given us. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I love you. You're so sweet.
I love you too. Following you and you putting that out there about your son and you saying, I told him, I mean, that just hit me so strong. I've watched your testimony and I remember whenever he had the blood clot and the brain bleed, I remember you putting it on there. I remember scrolling my phone and waking my husband up and telling him, we've got to pray right now. We've got to pray
Oh,
for
man.
Jasmine
Thank you.
Corcoran's son right this minute. Like we need God to move. She needs God to move. Sometimes
Yes.
I'll think, Lord, I'm going to pray for their kid like it's mine because I don't want to have to go through this myself. I want to be there. I want to be
Yeah.
what I hope that people would be for me. But
Yeah.
you saying and you putting out there the other day on stories and saying, I told him, you give the devil and you show him, you give it everything you got for God. You give him all the praise and
Yeah.
you show the devil. I know what you put me through. I know what I've went through this year, but I literally went through hell and I am here praising God with all of my
Yeah.
heart. And I thought, oh my goodness, like we've got to get her on. We've got to have her to share this testimony of God's greatness and his power. And thank you so much for being so
Thank you.
vulnerable. I know it's not easy to go through those moments and to relive that and to reshare that, but you did. And we're forever grateful. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you. Thank you for your prayers because you know what? I wish there was a way for me to buy a Super Bowl ad or something and just be like, hey, everyone who even just whispered a prayer, you are a part of Dylan's miracle. You are a part of it. And I can never, ever, ever say thank you enough for all of you, whether you woke somebody up like you did, or whether you just saw it the next day and just breathed to thank you, Jesus. You're a part of his miracle. And Dylan's crew is the best.
For sure. And we're grateful that you have put this journey out there and let us all be a part of Dylan's crew. We're not going to quit praying for the miracles to come, but we are thanking God for the miracle that He has already done, the healing that He's already given him.
Yes,
And
thank
we
you.
just know that God is going to continue the miracle and the testimony of His story to be so great. So thank you for allowing
Awesome.
God to use your story and for sharing it for us here. We appreciate you. Have a great day.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Unashamedly You podcast. As always, we ask if this podcast has blessed you in any way, please go share it on your social media page and tag us. Go leave us a review and subscribe so that you get the notification every Friday when a new episode releases. Thank you so much for your constant love and support in this space. Now go be unashamedly you.
I cry, Lord, have you forgotten me? It seems lately you're not around, and all the tears and all my fears I know you'd see if you look down. But in the darkness I hear you so softly say these words. I'm just working on your testimony. Don't give up on me. I'm moving in ways you cannot see. I know right now it's lonely and the darkness weighs on you, but just have faith, trust, believe. I'm just working on your testimony. I'm just working on your testimony. If you're alone and feel you cannot win, and you're tired of always feeling down, all your tears and all your fears, just know He sees them as He looks down. And in the dark